Hi, it's Terry Ryder from Hotspotting. I hope you're all having a good day. When I talk to people about real estate markets around Australia, people often find me talking initially about what's happening in the local economy. It's something that I emphasise a lot because I see the connections between what's happening in the local economy and consequently what happens in local real estate markets. The two things are very strongly connected. So I've got here some figures for the 8 states and territories showing how much the economies in each of those states and territories have grown over the last 5 years. I think it's really revealing, and it's worth sharing with you, I think, because it does show you the strong connections between real estate market performance and what's happening not in the national economy but in the local economy at a state and city level. So in the first instance, we have New South Wales, and the growth in the economy of New South Wales for the last 4 years has been particularly strong. It's grown at between 3-4% or even more in each of those years, according to these figures. And it's not a coincidence that during that time, the Sydney property market has been the strongest of the capital city markets for most of that period, with pretty strong price growth. Then we have Victoria also showing very, very similar figures in terms of the growth in the Victorian economy to Sydney over that past 4 calendar years. And again, not a coincidence that the Melbourne property market has been very strong throughout that period. Now then we look down at Tasmania. Tasmania in some of the earlier years is a quite weak growth, but in the last two of the last 3 years it's had strong growth in its state economy at the same level or similar level to New South Wales and Victoria. And again, we've seen as a consequence of that in the last year or two the rise of the Hobart property market to the point where Hobart is right now the hottest market in Australia, certainly amongst the capital cities. It's probably too hot to be able to go there and buy sensibly. Property is selling very quickly, and it's leading the capital cities on price growth at the moment. If we look at Queensland, Queensland has had quite a weak economy in recent years. Traditionally, Queensland a very strong economy, but over the last 3 or 4 years, which coincides with the period in which the resources investment boom was no longer happening, the Queensland economy, which is a little bit hooked into all of that, has had a couple of years in which the economy has got smaller, not larger. And we've seen underperformance in the Brisbane property market. It's been solid, and there's been pockets of it that shown good growth, but Brisbane hasn't really shown the growth in real estate that a lot of people have predicted for it. And I think this is the reason why, because it doesn't have the oomph from the underlying economy that Melbourne and Sydney have been getting for the last few years. But what's significant here is that in the last year or two, the Queensland economy has started to show some pretty good growth numbers again. And that's coming through in all sorts of other ways. Jobs creation is up. The interstate migration figures are favouring Queensland, particularly southeast Queensland again. And I think it bodes quite well for Brisbane and southeast Queensland real estate moving forward, particularly as there is also that affordability equation to factor in, the price differential between Brisbane on the one hand and Sydney and Melbourne on the other. People in those cities, their property values have risen. They've got lots of equity, looking for somewhere cheaper and with better rental yields to buy. And Brisbane certainly comes to mind. And based on those recent improvement in economic figures for Queensland, maybe we're going to see some performance out of Brisbane reasonably soon. Then we look at the other one that's interesting for me is South Australia. I'm constantly talking about the Adelaide property market as being very underrated, and the South Australian economy being much better than people give it credit for. So if we look at these figures, 2013, 14 and 15, the South Australian economy has grown, but quite low numbers. But in the last 2 years, 2016, the rate of growth increased, and then in 2017 increased again quite exponentially. To last year, the South Australian economy, according to these numbers, grew more than anywhere else in Australia. And I've been telling people about the improvement in that economy, and there's more to come, and that people should be taking notice of the Adelaide property market for that reason, and also the affordability differential, the value for money you get there, the better rental yields, the heightened activity I'm seeing in the sales volumes numbers, all sorts of reasons why I think more people should be paying attention to Adelaide as a place to buy. And lastly, we've got Western Australia. The economic figures here, 2013, 14, 15, 16, negative numbers for the Western Australian economy. And not surprisingly, the Perth property market at the same time has been going backwards, with prices falling and rentals falling and vacancies high. But last year, for the first time in 5 or 6 years, the Western Australian economy showed growth again. And we're seeing more and more evidence of that emerging. And again, it's not a coincidence that we're seeing signs of recovery in the Perth property market. I'm seeing very strong evidence of it. And I think Perth is, as I keep calling it, a city of opportunity. So lots of evidence here supporting one of my underlying philosophies that if you want to know about capital city property markets, first look at what's happening in the underlying state or territory economy. Look at the patterns there, look what's coming up, and I'll give you some clues as to where the best places might be to start directing your investment dollars. That's it for now. I'll talk to you again soon. Terry Ryder from hotspotting.com.au. I'll be talking to you again later in the week.